Today on Pep Talk, we're going to be discussing the latest updates coming from Russia and Ukraine, including the latest remark made by President Biden talking about a regime change in Russia. And we are also going to be discussing a potential Twitter competitor founded by the one and only Elon Musk. That and more today on Pep Talk. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Pep Talk. So today we're going to start off by talking about the latest updates coming from Russia and Ukraine. So on the battlefront, basically, it's more of the same. This is looking more and more like a stalemate. Analysts say Russian forces have effectively failed in their efforts to quickly take over Ukraine. And in fact, Ukraine has actually successfully retaken a couple of towns from Russian troops. And in the meantime, President Zelensky is continuing to call for aid from other NATO nations. He's calling for planes and tanks from NATO to continue to aid the war effort. And we still just have to see how this is going to play out. It's a stalemate essentially right now, and we have to see what's going to happen next, essentially. But even more interesting than that is Biden's latest remark regarding the war in Ukraine. So I'm going to refer to this New York Times article where this quote is just astonishingly insane. But let me just read the little paragraph for you. Quote, President Biden delivered a forceful denunciation of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine on Saturday, declaring, quote, for God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. End quote, as he cast the war as the latest front in a decades-long battle between the forces of democracy and oppression. End quote. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for 1 second. So the New York Times just said, quoted Biden saying that this man cannot remain in power, referring to Vladimir Putin, which is obviously a call for a regime change, which would involve some sort of conflict or potential world war here. And the media obviously doesn't want Biden to come off inciting a world war. So they obviously have to cover his tracks, as they always do. And let's see how the New York Times does this. Quote, it was not immediately clear whether Mr. Biden's apparent call for the ouster of Mr. Putin was one of the off-the-cuff remarks for which he is known for, or a calculated jab, one of many in the speech, I'm sure. But it risks confirming Russia's central propaganda claim that the West, and particularly the United States, is determined to destroy Russia, end quote. So, according to the New York Times, maybe what he said was, we don't know what he meant, but it could have been just one of the off-the-cuff remarks that, he does, or maybe it was a calculated jab, one of which were many in his speech. I'm sure there were a lot of calculated jabs made in that speech over the weekend. But I can't stress enough how crazy this statement is. Literally declaring for a regime change inside of Russia, and yet the media goes to say, oh no, that's not what he meant. We don't know what he was trying to say. It could have been, we don't know what it means. And it's like, no, what he said is pretty clear what he's trying to say. I don't know how you can take it any other way. And yet we see the White House trying to circle back, trying to say, whoa, that's not what he meant. Quote from the same article, the White House immediately sought to play down the remark. Quote, the president's point was that Putin cannot be allowed to exercise power over his neighbors or the region, a White House official told reporters. He was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change, end quote. Okay, so the White House obviously had to try to bring Biden back, reel him in and say, whoa, guys, he wasn't calling for regime change. I know that's what he said, but that's not what he meant, guys. We know what he meant, and he just meant that, Russia or Putin can't have control over his neighbors in the region. He wasn't saying that there needs to be a regime change, even though he literally said that this man cannot remain in power. So obviously the media is going full front, trying to recover from Biden's gaffe here, trying to make him sound like he was saying something intelligent and smart rather than saying something completely insane and crazy and unpopular. But that's just how it is nowadays, obviously. And I just had to stress this because it's all on Twitter recently. It's all over the news. President Biden saying that for God's sake, this man cannot be in power is the quote, which is just insane. The fact that he got away, being able to say that. But there you have it. We have the media coming up for him once again. And moving on further with the article, I want to talk about this too. In the battle, we need to be clear-eyed, Mr. Biden said in front of a crowd waving Polish, Ukrainian, American flags. This battle will not be won in days or months either. We need to steel ourselves for the long flight ahead, end quote. So that's kind of the end of the New York Times article I want to talk about. But what does he mean that this battle will not be won in days or months, but we need to steel ourselves for the long flight ahead? Well, I think it means a number of things. For one, he's not doing anything helpful. If he were not in office, if anyone else were in office, I feel like there's no way Putin would have invaded Ukraine. And but with Biden in office, he's not doing anything, and Putin feels like, oh well, I'm not going to have any repercussions for my actions, so I'm going to go full ahead and invade Ukraine. Two, he's not doing anything now. He started off by doing these horrible sanctions on Russia, which did effectively nothing. And then everyone in the meantime was telling him, well, hey, maybe you should, put up some oil and natural gas sanctions on Russia. Maybe do something that will actually maybe hurt them. And then he was like, okay, fine, I'll put those sanctions up. And then he failed to realize that when he put those sanctions up, that because he cut off the Keystone Pipeline, and we have no energy of our own, we're wholly reliant on these other tyrannical regimes for our energy now. Everyone over here in the U.S. is so focused on climate change and renewable energy that when we put up these sanctions against Russia, the civilians over here in the U.S. are fighting most of the battle against these crazy gas prices over $7, $8 in some places in California. Inflation prices are off the charts on every sort of good imaginable. And yet, this is a battle that is not going to be won in days or months either, guys. We need to prepare ourselves for the long flight ahead. Essentially telling the American people, well, you need to put up with the higher prices and the worst living standards for a lot longer, actually, because we need to fight this battle. And I just can't think, like, why? Why do we need to do this? And I'm not saying like that we shouldn't be in support of Ukraine or anything like that, but why is it that we need to sit here with these sanctions and just let ourselves suffer with these higher prices and making lives harder for all of us when we aren't really doing anything? These sanctions even still aren't really doing anything to Russia. Their economy was garbage before the war even started. It's not like these sanctions are going to do much anyway. If Biden were to do anything, he would create a no-fly zone or something like that. But I'm not even saying that's what we should do, because that would draw us possibly into a larger conflict. I'm just saying that we're not doing anything right now other than making our lives here harder at home right now. And the fact that he's saying that, well, this might go on for a lot longer than months, we just need to stick through it, is ridiculous, given the fact that we're having to suffer for essentially doing like nothing. We aren't really doing anything that's helpful for the situation. And I find that quite ridiculous and unfair. But that's the latest coming from Russia and Ukraine. We don't know what's going to happen. Hopefully Ukraine comes out on top, obviously. We do not want Russia to be able to think that this is an acceptable behavior. We don't want Taiwan to be taken over by China either later on if this is successful. But at the same time, we need to realize, hey, like, if we're going to do something, let's do something. Let's not make our lives here harder at home for no apparent reason. But that's just my two thoughts on it. But I want to move on to this next subject, talking about this Twitter alternative. So as we all know, social media right now is effectively acting as the de facto public square. And at the very same time, the social media giants are the ones who decide who gets to use the so-called public square. They are effectively erasing anyone who they disagree with. And we've seen this on multiple occasions. We've seen this with videos concerning COVID information, people talking about how some mask types don't work, or how some of the information from the CDC doesn't make sense given the data we have now, and all those videos being deemed misinformation so that they've been shut off of YouTube, taken down, banned. We've seen this with the New York Post's Hunter Biden laptop story last year, which was deemed as Russian misinformation, even though it was completely 100% true, as proven by the New York Times months after President Biden was elected into office. And of course, we've seen it with the president of the United States, Donald Trump, being banned off basically the face of the internet at this point by all of these social media giants. And but I think the worst of these is Twitter, as lots of news and political people with power are use the website Twitter to get the word out. And Twitter bans anyone that doesn't agree with left-wing ideology. And with that, I think a lot of people have taken notice, and one man has particularly taken special notice, and that is a very powerful, intelligent man, the one and only Elon Musk, who has taken notice of this free speech issue on Twitter and is thinking about possibly creating a Twitter alternative. According to Reuters.com, quote, Tesla Incorporated Chief Executive Officer Elon Musk is giving serious thought to building a new social media platform, the billionaire said in a tweet on Saturday. Quote, his tweets come a day after he put out a Twitter poll asking users if they believe Twitter adheres to the principle of free speech, to which over 70% voted no. End quote. So obviously, Elon and I'm sure lots of people all over the globe, all over the nation, are noticing that Twitter is really not being the free speech advocate it puts itself up to be. It is banning people that it simply disagrees with. It's banning people like the Babylon Bee for saying factual statements such as I don't even want to, not sure if I can even say it because I don't want to be banned off of YouTube, but saying factual statements, you can look it up more on Google, that disagree with left-wing ideology about biology and men and women, men being able to not be women and women not being able to be men, essentially. That's all I'm going to say on that because I do not want to get hit either, but there are lots of issues with Twitter, with free speech issues right now, and a lot of people are taking notice, obviously, and Elon is a very powerful man, one of the richest men in the world, and I really think that if he sees this issue and starts to put up this Twitter alternative, that something big could happen here. I think the only way that these social media companies like Twitter, like Google, like Facebook, YouTube are going to be able to learn that they can't ban whoever they don't like is by having competition for these companies. Right now, these are the only companies out there. They have no competition. They are the competition. They are themselves. They have no one to compete against, and because of that, they can essentially do whatever they want with no repercussions. We have Donald Trump's Truth Social, but that's essentially been a large failure, with it not even being able to support any of the users that wanted to join for the first month and a half or 2 months, putting them on a wait list. We have other video sites like, I believe, Rumble, I think it's called, which no one knows what that is. But I think that if we have someone like Elon Musk, who, with the resources that he has, puts up an actual alternative to Twitter, something could happen here. And with that, hopefully influences other people to do the same thing and advocate for the right to free speech and say things that other people might potentially disagree with, and yet still have good, logical discussions with these people and have a conversation discussing a difference in ideas and ideologies and being able to come up with solutions to problems that are inherently plaguing our society today. But I just wanted to bring this to our attention because it could lead to something really different. It could lead to possibly a new wave of new websites to compete with these social media super giants. And personally, I think that's great. I think we need some more competition in the social media sphere and being able to have alternatives to these websites that can essentially see themselves as being able to ban whoever they like and do whatever they want, because that's not fair and it's not allowing people to speak their minds freely, and I don't appreciate that. But anyway, that's about all that I have for you today. I want to thank you so much for watching Pet Talk, and I will see you all next week, hopefully with some better news. And with that being said, I will see you all next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye, everybody.